If we can, as engineers, become more people-centered in our day-to-day approach, that's how we become layoff-proof.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 227, Layoff-Proofing Your Career. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farson.
Victor, you and I have been in this game for let's say a long time.
Depends how you define long.
More than 10 years.
Yeah. Which game? Wait, stop. If you're referring to software in general, then we've been like for 30 years or God knows.
That's what I'm getting to. Is like this year is my 40th year.
Yeah, exactly. Too long.
So we've been in this game for a long time. We've seen green screens come and go. We've seen the advent of the PC, and dare I say, the Macintosh actually ended up being something.
That's probably the biggest miracle that happened to this industry. Nobody would have thought that Macintosh is going to beat Amiga.
Boy, you really are pulling it out today.
Yeah.
But back then, we didn't have to do and deal with as much stuff as we have to today, right?
No.
You and I aren't coding day to day as our day job anymore.
Back then I was playing games. That's what I was doing.
You were playing Snake, right? And
Exactly.
writing your own version of Snake. But what do we do now? I mean, we have a lot of layoffs going on in 2023. Probably won't get much better for a little while.
The layoffs are a good thing. Because the biggest problem in our industry is people. If you can get rid of them, then we're doing well.
By the way, people, this is not going to be an AI episode, so don't get lost on that right now. On today's show, we have Dagna Bieda on. Dagna, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
We're going to be talking about a couple of different things. One of them is dealing with the human side of software, and it's especially funny talking about AI. Really, hopefully that's the last time we say those two letters together in this episode. But the other thing is really what's been hitting home for a lot of people this year is trying to, how do we say it, layoff-proof your engineering career. I've only been laid off once. I won't get into the details, but it was a very good thing in the end. But for a lot of people, it's a horrible thing. It causes a lot of stress. But the dangerous side of that is if you think that you are unfireable, think again. Because that's what happened to me. And it still happened. Ended up working out well. Dagna, what do you think? How can we sort of make sure that we don't end up in that situation?
Well, there are some ways that you can layoff-proof your career by developing some skills that are typically not on an engineer's radar. Because let's face it, the way the educational system looks like, we are brainwashed, so to speak, to overvalue technical skills. What does a typical engineer do in their spare time? Develop a new project, learn a new programming language, maybe write their own assembler. I don't know, something that's fun on a technical aspect. Where in reality, creating software is a people game. I was really cracking up when you guys mentioned when you get rid of people, you're doing things right because people are at the heart of the problem. That's true. But people are also at the heart of the solution. If we can, as engineers, become more people-centered in our day-to-day approach, that's how we become layoff-proof. So that's a, general statement, but let's dive into the details.
When I was starting my career, most of engineers were people who precisely wanted not to be related with other people. Those were usually nerds that were outcasts of society environment, kind of, I have 2 friends, I will never get a girlfriend, nobody understands me type of stuff. What do? I become a software engineer. Probably it's not like that today, I'm guessing, but I'm talking 80s, 90s, that's how it was.
That makes sense. But if you go even earlier, like where did the programming started? It actually started with men and women being like the equal amounts of men and women. And it was just experienced professionals coming from other disciplines like mathematics, other types of engineering coming into programming. And then what happened? Nintendo came up with Game Boy. And with their marketing strategies, targeting towards young boys, young professionals, started getting more and more men interested in software, and a lot of women dropped out as a result because the marketing messaging wasn't getting to them. Now we have a kind of reversal with STEM and trying to increase the amount of diversity in tech, because diversity, as it turns out, is good for business. We're trying to bring more and more women and minorities into tech. But with what you were saying, Victor, earlier about, this friend of yours who would never have a girlfriend, and that's why he decided to be an engineer, I get it. For a lot of engineers, the people skills are just not on the radar. Like, we want to hide behind the screen. And then even if you think of yourself as someone who talks well with other people and collaborates well with other people, there are still some things that you might not even be aware of. I will take myself as an example here. So when I started my career, I graduated from a university in Poland. I started working in programming companies in Poland, and then I moved to the United States. And it turned out that in my communication skills, I was too harsh, too direct. People didn't like it, my new American coworkers. And I had to really kind of reassess how I was approaching conversations, whether they were easy conversations with my peers or more difficult ones about raises, promotions, or when I wanted to promote my idea to get things done. At the end of the day, we create software products for other people and we do it with other people. So even if we want to hide behind our computer from those people, it's not their fault. It's typically not our fault either. It's typically the internal mental programming that we have in our own minds that tells us, no, it's better to just sit in front of the computer instead of having a conversation. But here's the thing. If you're a quote unquote coding monkey and all you do is just code and you do what people tell you to do, you are not layoff-proofing your career. Because in order to layoff-proof your career, you have to figure out how are you benefiting the business that you're working for. And for a lot of the companies that have engineering at their core, like if they sell a product or provide service that is based on their product that they developed in-house, it's really critical to have that understanding of how the engineers and their daily actions trickle down to benefiting the business and either making more money, attracting new clients, retaining the clients that they have, or reducing the amount of money being spent. The way that I work with my coaching clients is essentially focusing on soft skills, and that's part of the solution to layoff-proofing your career.
I'm still kind of hanging on to the very beginning of that discourse where, because of Nintendo, men were playing games. That's why we don't have women.
The history would have looked completely different if it was a game girl and not a Game Boy.
Fair enough.
It's in the name.
Interesting.
And you can see Uncle Bob had a presentation that actually talked about it, about the beginning and the history of programming. So that's where I got that information from. And if you look at the development of Nintendo and the time that the drop-off of the amount of women in tech started, these graphs look identical.
No, it makes perfect sense. I just never thought about it that way.
So I want to go back to one of the things you said while you were going there. You were too direct. I've had a few people tell me that in my career. Don't be so direct. And I just want to say, you people are wimps. I'm not that direct.
Okay.
Okay, I've softened up over the years. I've gotten a little bit better, but my wife will sometimes question that. The other key part that you were saying there was you've got to figure out how you benefit the business. If you are not benefiting the business, you are on thin ice. Period. If you take a look at an organization and they're going through a head cutting phase, not a head hunting phase, but a head cutting phase, who goes first? Marketing. Actually, who goes first is recruiting. That should always be your first clue. If the recruiters are gone, then everybody else is getting ready to leave.
I would just modify slightly what you just said, Darin. It's not only about whether you're benefiting the business, but whether business knows that it's benefiting from you.
It's both. Thank you for pointing that out. It's
because
absolutely
you have
both.
a lot of, I'm going to reuse your phrase, coding monkeys, that actually might be completely critical for business without business being aware of that.
I can be wrong again.
No,
That's
wrong.
fine.
You're just half right.
I'm half right. Yeah, okay. I'll take half right and you take the other half and then we're good. But, okay, obviously I was going back to telling people they're a bunch of wimps. What kind of people skills should we be learning? In the States, people are still averse to actually going into the office in a lot of places, at least from the tech industry, the knowledge workers. They're still, I don't want to go. In Europe, I've been hearing people are just actually showing up to the offices all the time. It's just as if nothing ever happened for the past 3 years, which is sort of interesting. But it makes sense because it goes back to public transit is much more available in Europe than it is over here.
In Europe, it's more likely that you're 15 minutes away from the office. And there are actually two components. You're likely to be closer to the office. Second, you're likely to have much smaller apartment. Meaning you're working in a living room. Exactly. You want to get out and it's close by.
I would say it has nothing to do with going to the office or not, how your people skills are looking like. It's really about the mindset. And mindset is critical for how you show up daily to the conversations, what you prioritize, where you put your time, effort, and attention, as well as how you handle a situation in which you've been laid off. So you can have two people that have been let go and someone might get depressed and some other person might just get into it, applying, believing that they're really good at what it is that they do because they've had the experience, they've built the awareness of how they can benefit the business and they're able to actually articulate it in an interview setting and they just land their next job without any trouble. It's the meaning that you assign to what has happened to you that's critical here. And the mindset is what matters. But going back to working in that people setting, you were asking, Darren, what are some specific skills to focus on in terms of layoff-proofing? One of the things we already kind of hinted at, which was business acumen, right? Understanding the organization that you work for, how that organization creates value, and how you add to that value creation process as an individual contributor, as a team lead, as a staff engineer, whatever it is that your role is. Having that business acumen is very critical. The second thing is collaboration. How do you reach out to people? How do you find hidden dependencies that can improve or unblock processes? Do you just proactively do that on your own, or do you wait for people to tell you what to do? And that doesn't really depend on whether you work from home or you go into the office. Then we have clear communication, things like setting expectations, realizing hidden assumptions that people have coming into conversation, asking clarifying questions, actively listening to what is being said. These are really critical. And with respect to coming across as mean, direct, that really comes down to your style of communication. The best communication that you can have in order to be the most efficient collaborator is assertive type of communication. And that's the one when you come into a conversation and you're able to start off with, acknowledging people for what they've done and the value that they bring so that you lower their defenses, psychologically speaking, in order to get your point across. And if you do so respectfully, that's how you're able to win in a conversation, by having assertive conversation.
That's always a fine line for me. Just to be honest, old guy, new tricks. I want to go back to one of the mindset things that you were saying there a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
In a layoff situation, the two people, one person saw it as the layoff happening to them, where the other person saw it as a layoff happening for them, which was my case when I got laid off. The company ended up going under. It's all fine. No big deal, right? It ended up being a better deal for me instead of hanging on until the ship went under.
Blessing in disguise.
It was a great blessing in disguise. Actually, it wasn't very much in disguise. It was just very out front. How can people sort of come out of that spiral? Because that's easy for me to go into the spiral really quick. Ask my wife. At this point, in my career, I'm able to sort of deal with it. But it's still like used to it'd be hours or days, and now it's like 30 seconds. It's like, and then I just move on. How can people help sort of rewire their brain there? Maybe play less games and stop looking at social media?
Oh, for sure that helps. But the answer here is really mindfulness and awareness. Being aware, what is the pattern that's playing on repeat in the back of your mind? I like to say that I moved from programming computers to reprogramming human minds, because that's what I do with my clients. And a lot of it is understanding what is your internal mental programming. What are the patterns? What are the loops? What is playing right now? You know, if you compare the mind to like a computer, a lot of the time we have access to the user interface, right? Something that's like right in front of our face. But if you want to know what's the CPU temperature, you can just open up the terminal. And if you know the commands to kind of like bring it up, you can pull up all that information. So what's key here to like getting unstuck is first noticing what is going on in your mind, that you are entering that spiral, that you are saying things that are not necessarily true, but your mind is just saying those things because it's been saying them your entire life, right? It's in like a while one loop installed in your brain. The step one is awareness. The second step is having that understanding of the limiting beliefs that you have, of that internal mental programming, and then choosing to change those. That's not like a 5-minute process. I would say it's probably a lifelong process of like self-discovery and understanding how you work as a human being, and then how you can use it in order to create a better life for yourself. So hope that answers your question.
It does. One of the things that I found is if I don't eat, you don't want to be around me.
You're getting hangry is what it is.
Exactly. So once I was able to say, oh, okay, I have my alarm set, just go eat. Don't eat junk. Eat something that's going to not a lot of sugar, preferably no sugar, but hey, come on. I'm going to have a little bit of sugar. And it's those kinds of things that help me sort of keep even keel and keep going. Now, I sort of promised that we weren't going to talk about AI, but everything that you were just saying, one of the great things about AI is how bad it hallucinates. Sometimes it gets stuff right, but a lot of times it gets stuff wrong, and it gets it wrong in a royal way.
Compared to what?
Compared to something
Other
that didn't
humans?
exist before AI. Other
Have you
humans.
listened to politicians ever?
Okay. This is not a political podcast, but yes, I understand what you're saying there. But go with me here for just a second, because I'll see if it ends up somewhere correct. It may not. If I was the A person before that was spiraling, to me that's similar to what happens in hallucinations from AI. Right? Think about what AI is, at least generative AI. It's making a guess of what the next word is going to be. And if you're in a spiral, you're just choosing to let the thing play out.
That's a beautiful comparison. And it's all running on autopilot, right? If you want to change it, you have to take control.
That's why I'm saying we need to get rid of all the AI. No more coding help from any of the other tooling. We have to write it all ourselves and completely trust in the human. That would be stupid too, right?
That's extreme in the other way. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's how do we sort of? The visualization I have right now is a bowling alley or a bowling lane, and I've got the guardrails up. Right. So what are keeping me in the guardrails? I might not be able to stay right down the center, and I don't want to be in either gutter, but I've got the rails up, helping me sort of bounce back and forth. What are some of the same things? I think one of the things I just said was, I think, true. If you're not eating and if all you're doing is chugging energy drinks, probably not the best thing for you. I can't say that for everybody. This is not a health podcast. We're not giving health advice. I'm not a lawyer and all the other disclaimers. I just know that I'm not a very good person when I don't eat.
And that makes perfect sense, right? Mind and body are one. So whatever it is that you're putting in your body is affecting your mind, but also the thoughts that you're having in your mind are affecting your body. So it's a two-way, bi-directional highway by controlling what you eat, how much sleep you get, whether you're relaxed in your body, whether you take care of your body will affect the quality of your thoughts and then how your thoughts are going on in your mind. Some people with their thoughts only can bring themselves to a suicidal state. Some other people can make marvelous things happen because of what they think, because what it is that they believe about themselves to be true, and how all that trickles down to either them taking action or staying in the status quo that they're in. If you're listening and you're feeling like you're going on a downward spiral, it's best to reach out for help. And it doesn't have to be professional help. It can be just a third-party perspective that will help you see things differently. One thing that I discuss with my clients whenever we sign up and start working together is that the thoughts that we have in our mind, most of them are not true. But we learn throughout our lifetime, with a lifetime experience, that life plays out a certain way, and this is how it happens for me. And it's really hard to break outside of that rut without having a different perspective. Sometimes we're not able to come up with that perspective on our own, and we need that third-party perspective. Something that helped me a lot in my career was actually, after I moved to the States, I didn't realize how hard the move was going to be. So I experienced some complicated grieving my past life, missing my friends, my family. Nobody died, thankfully. But still, moving abroad was like a big thing that trickled down to later on in my job, experiencing burnout, depression. I also had a kid, so it was postpartum depression on top of that. It was a lot of things. The moment that I noticed myself spiraling and being at that bottom, I reached out for help. I got myself into therapy, and talk therapy was phenomenal for me because I could see how, just like you can reprogram an app, refactor the functions that you want to refactor, through talking, through understanding, through awareness, mindfulness, you can also reprogram your mind.
So if people are listening, they're thinking one of two things. She's right on, or she's crazy. Right?
Which one are you thinking, Darren? Come on, be honest.
I'm riding right down the middle of the bowling lane right now.
Okay, so you're
because
some of those things made sense, but not. Exactly. I'm not buying it. I'm not fully buying it.
No, I actually buy into everything that you're saying.
But
see, you're doing it to me right now. I can tell. So you're turning me into a case study as we're talking. If you don't get your mind right, you're not going to be anywhere right. If you don't get your body right, you're not going to be anywhere right. So getting your body and your mind and everything else working good is going to get you in shape to actually do life. Sometimes you might need help. We were talking about whether that is professional help, just hanging out with friends, maybe heading down to your favorite fast food or coffee shop and just seeing a familiar face. And that helps you to sort of like, okay, everything's right in the world.
That's part of it.
Oh, that's part of it. Okay, what part am I missing?
You're saying, here are the things that I can do, right? And I'm saying, you need to become the next version of yourself who doesn't have those thoughts, who doesn't do impulsive hamburger eating actions. I don't know. I'm just thinking hamburgers are not that healthy. What I'm saying is, whenever you realize how your mind operates, what are the patterns that you keep playing, typically on autopilot, things that you keep doing day in, day out without thinking too much about it, how do you take over and assert control? Because here's what happens. You have a certain set of beliefs about who you are as a person, how the world works around you. And based on those beliefs, you filter everything that happens in front of you. All the information that you get from the reality is a type of feedback. And then you get to interpret that feedback with the meaning that you assign to it. So I know we're getting deep here, so if you get lost at any point, please let me know. But essentially, as you're going through that feedback loop, you are becoming a different version of yourself because you are interrupting the thought patterns that are running on autopilot, and you're doing something else than what you have been doing. And thanks to that, you can break free from those thoughts, those behaviors, those actions, because who we believe we are and how the world works, the world map that we have in our mind, that informs the thoughts that we have. The thoughts we have trickle down into our behaviors that run on autopilot. So if I believe about myself to be a pizza lover, I'm going to order pizza because I love eating pizza. And in order for me to eat healthier and be healthier, I can force myself for some amount of time not to eat pizza, walk out from the room where there's pizza, tell my husband never to order pizza again, stuff like that. But if I truly, deep down, believe that I am the kind of person who believes she loves pizza, eventually, when the willpower runs out, I am going to get back to who I believe I am. So you can improve by taking action. But that's not going to take you so far because that requires willpower. The moment you change who you believe you are, that's the moment when you can change the rest of your life. And I know it's a grand statement, but anyone who's learned how to code experienced that in their life. You were a different person before you knew how to code, and you were a different person. Your reality was a different reality after you knew how to code and landed that programming job.
Unless you're programming JavaScript, then your life is just miserable anyway. Okay, here's your variation of, so I've got two things. What you're saying is, first we need to be prior to do before we have.
Yes.
Where a lot of us get messed up is we try to do before we try to figure out the be part. And then we're in a vicious cycle between we never make it to the have because we're stuck in the do instead of becoming who we are.
Beautifully said. And if I may interrupt just really quickly here, Darren, because that was beautiful how you summed it up. And another outcome here is too, getting yourself a great salary job in high tech that pays you incredible money, incredible benefits, and then you burn out. Because you don't really care about what it is that you're doing, and you start dreading the work on a daily basis, even though from the outside perspective, everything looks beautiful. But because you haven't figured out the be, you're doing something that's out of alignment with who you are. And even if it pays beautifully, it can lead to burnout.
To play devil's advocates just for a second, right? And to jump outside of software industry. Aren't you describing right now the vast majority of people?
Probably.
Majority of people do not like their job. They're not passionate about the job, and so on and so forth. Most of the people on this planet are doing job exclusively because they have to, and then going to do something else because they want to. Right? It almost feels like the people we're talking about in our industry is in a way already privileged, but how can we be a bit more privileged so that we can be more effective in a way?
Or step outside of the comfort zone. Because, Victor, a lot of the things that I see as I work with my clients, some of them come from FAANG companies, some of them come from like smaller startups. And people have big dreams of starting their startup, of changing the industry, but they have fear. So they end up staying in a company that is okay because it pays okay. It pays the bills, there's money for vacation, whatever. And instead of chasing their dreams that could make everybody's lives better as a result of a company that they could have started, they just stay in their job. So my personal mission is to help people reach for their dreams, whatever they might be, instead of staying in that comfortable, cushy job with golden handcuffs on.
I'm also going to go a different angle here. What do you say to someone who says, I don't have any beliefs?
That's not true. That's just not true.
But prove that it's not true.
After you've had a conversation, ask yourself what's the meaning that you assigned to that conversation. Let's say you are asking for a raise, you didn't get it. What is your mind telling you? I'm dumb. I didn't deserve it. I'm not enough. I need to learn more to deserve it. I need to move to a different company to deserve it. The economy is not right now to get a raise. All these are examples of beliefs that you have about who you are or how the world operates around you.
Okay, see, you gave the simple answer. That's all we needed. It's obvious, people. Don't overthink it. If you're talking to yourself, either listen to yourself or don't listen to yourself. Hint, probably don't listen to yourself most of the time. You'll probably work out much better. I try to not listen to myself a whole lot. I know Victor just completely ignores me all the time. We talked about it earlier. This is my roughly 40th year, if I'm doing the math right. Maybe this year is 39. I'm at the backside, hopefully, of my career. Knock on wood. I still have problems, but I can't imagine what it's like for people, assuming, without throwing universities under the bus, because they have their role. But I don't know that universities have the same role that they did when I was in school 40 years ago. I don't know if the value's there anymore. But let's say somebody's coming out of school with a CS degree. Actually a useful degree. Don't get me started on that. Now they've got 40, 50 years in front of them. The landscape has completely changed. What's your recommendation to those newbies coming into the market first time? How do they set themselves up right to where they're not having to unlearn all the mess that I'm still unlearning going on almost 40 years?
So at the time when we're recording this podcast with the layoffs happening, it is a tough market for someone who just graduated. So if you just graduated, you don't really have any professional experience and you're trying to get yourself into the tech industry, here's what I recommend you do. And it goes back to the people skills, really. To weather the storm, get yourself in a tech company, and make sure you're able to practice clear communication. Things like setting expectations, the assumptions, setting boundaries, asking clarifying questions, making sure you're assertive, being able to actively listen. That you also get in a position where you can practice collaboration. Things like reaching out to people, understanding how your role affects other departments. Things that you can also practice is proactivity and ownership. Leading an initiative, but also practicing admitting to mistakes. That's a big part of ownership. Practice in that role business acumen, understanding how the business that you work for works. And also work on self-marketing. So making sure that the people you work with know the value that you bring to the table. You can practice those layoff-proofing skills in various roles. You don't have to be an engineer. And then once you weather the storm, you can get back into an engineering role. And you'll be much better off than many of your friends who graduated at the same time and are stuck in the thinking that they have to have a developer or engineer role. It's kind of funny, actually, because a lot of the clients that I have, you mentioned the damage done by going through the education there. And a lot of the times, my bootcamp grad clients are way faster and more able to accelerate their career whenever they come to me than my clients with more quote-unquote traditional backgrounds and having a CS degree. And the reason why is because they are able to bring those skills from past careers, past degrees, and apply them into an engineering world. And they're able to use that leverage, and they know enough technical knowledge to be dangerous, to know what they're doing. Or once they become an engineer manager, for example, delegate that and know what to expect from people on their team. I hope that answers your question. And I also recommend anyone listening who's in that situation to read Range by David Epstein. It's a really good book that talks about how having experience for multiple different disciplines that may not seem related brings a huge benefit to problem-solving skills. And what is engineering if not problem-solving?
We've talked about boot camps in the past, and the one thing that you just called out there that I don't think we've talked about in previous episodes is the career changer. It's one thing to be somebody that's just deciding to go to boot camp instead of going to college, because you still don't have those life experiences yet. So I would expect, unless you're just like super nerd, that when you come out of the backside of boot camp, other than probably saving $90,000, $150,000, you're probably going to be equivalent, maybe a little bit better than somebody coming out of traditional schooling. But if you're somebody that had been in market for 15, 20 years, not like me, super old, but you're 30, maybe 40, and go to a boot camp, and you've taken all your experience, and then it's like, oh, that's where it makes sense. I used to do this. You start doing those analogies of, oh, this makes sense because of this, and this, you start tying it together. I can see where that value comes in. Two of the words, though, that you used when you were talking there, number one was boundaries. I want to come back to that one. And then ownership. Let's start with boundaries first. How do you tell the person you're reporting to, no, I'm not working this weekend, in a polite and assertively communicative way?
Beautiful question. So let's start with the definition of boundaries, what that is. And the way that I define it is essentially the things that you will do or you will not do. So whenever you're talking about sharing your boundaries with someone else, first, you have to become aware of what your boundaries are. And why is it important for you to not work this weekend? So once you're aware where this is coming from, that's when your why becomes more powerful. You get more motivated to actually say no. Because if something that you are concerned about, fear about, like part of your limiting beliefs might be like, if I don't work this weekend, I get fired. If that's a belief that you have, you're not likely to say no. But if your beliefs are around, I am going to spend quality time with my family, so I am not available this weekend, you will have a completely different conversation depending on what's your mindset around why are you setting those boundaries in the first place, what your values are, and how confident you feel about yourself and your skills. If you're a fresh grad, being concerned about being let go, you're probably not going to say, hey, I'm not working this weekend, because you might be afraid of for your job. It's a completely different situation, so you have to have that situational awareness. When it comes to the boss, it also depends on what kind of boss you have, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of micromanaging bosses who believe that you have to just work gazillion hours in order to make everything perfectly done. But those limiting beliefs are on them. If you're part of that team and you are being requested to and it's not reasonable, there's no point in trying to fix your boss. It's time to move on to a different team, to a different company, find a different gig. So not sure if that answers your question, Darren, because I feel like it's a complex situation and the exact answer will vary on on what is a person's specific situation, if that makes sense.
It boils down to management and leadership. Those two things are very different. When I worked in oil and gas in the 90s, this is the first place I learned this concept. When things were good, things were great for the executive team. When things were bad, layoffs, everything else, things were still really good for the executive team. And that's when I learned that harsh fact. Now, to the boundary, it's like sometimes you may have to pay your dues. I don't have a problem with paying dues. You just have to understand, okay, what is the trade-off in this? And only you can answer what the trade-off is. Because if you don't want to work weekends, then you probably shouldn't apply for a job to where you have on-call rotations on the weekends.
Exactly. That's a beautiful summary there, Darren. I feel like you answered that question way better than I did. Victor, what are your thoughts?
What I got from this conversation is that you should be executive then.
Yes, you should be an executive. If you can go straight to the C level.
Conversation, right?
Yeah. If you want to be able to call the shots, you must be the executive. That goes back to the startup conversation that we were having. It's like people want to do their startup. Well, be the startup. If you need to work a side job, if you need to deliver pizzas at night so you during the day you can do your thing, that's just a job. There's nothing wrong with having a job. There's a big difference between a job and a career.
True. Very true. And there are moments in time when you need to take that job just to support creating a career that will actually create the meaning in life that you're looking for.
And that leads me to the other word that you said was ownership, and all of this is tying together. What I've seen, and again, this may be old guy standing out in the backyard shaking his fist at the sky. These kids just don't take ownership of what they're doing. That's a very broad statement, I know. And again, old guy saying it. But it, to an extent, it still appears true. When I'm talking to people, it's like, yeah, I come in, I clock in, I do my JIRA tickets, and I go home. That's not ownership to me. That's punching a clock. That is the industrial age brought into a desk.
That's the so-called quiet quitting now, right?
Yeah. But if we flip it to what we were just saying, it's like, okay, look, I've got this thing I want to do. I'm going to get a job. And I think this is the key point to this. I'm going to go get a job so I can build my career. The job is going to fund my career. My career isn't going to fund my side gig. And again, going back to beliefs, I believe that's the only way you would be able to get out of that problem. I mean, there's probably other ways too, but that would be one of the key things is making that switch in your head. It's like, okay, I'm going to use a real example. I'm going to go get a job loading trucks from midnight to 6 at FedEx or UPS. Because I know I can clock in at midnight, I can clock out at 6, I can come home and sleep till about 10, and then I can work from 10 until 6 on what I really want to do. And then I go to the job at night to do what it is. Would I do that forever? No, my body wouldn't hold up. But could that bridge me to the point to where now I don't have to work at UPS at night? Maybe. And you know what? You're moving, you're exercising. Nothing wrong with loading boxes.
That makes sense. And I want to kind of tie back to you throwing your fist at the sky and being like, what's wrong with people? But here's one thing I want to point out. I believe that we're really brainwashed, for lack of a better word. I'm trying to think of a better word, but that's the one that comes to my mind right now. Brainwashed by educational system to first overvalue tech skills as engineers. That's why we don't really think about the people skills and we want to hide behind our computer. And 2, we are, I feel like I have that word in the back of my head. How you call it when you train someone to do a specific thing in a specific way?
Apprenticeship?
No, that's not the word.
Well, that word works too. Mentor?
Nope.
Brainwash?
We've already used that one.
Synonyms to brainwash. What are the synonyms? Conditioned. That's the word I was looking for. Yes.
Okay.
So we're conditioned to 1, overvalue tech skills, and 2, to wait for external validation and instructions. And that's why a lot of people don't take that ownership in their career. That's why there's a small amount. Think about it. When you go to school, what happens? You get homework. You turn your homework in. The teacher tells you, you passed, you didn't pass, you got A, B, whatever. Now you need to work on this. There is not a lot of schooling that teaches you how to find that validation of your skills on your own, how to use your brain and make a judgment what's best for you in your career. You need to have an epiphany, sort of, to get to that point. For me, my epiphany was being depressed and reaching out to a therapist and going through a process where I was looking into my values and realizing, oh, why am I spending my time trying to get a better salary and for my mom to say, hey, I'm proud of you because you're doing better than your cousin? Why am I doing that if that's not really valuable to me? I'm doing that only because I put pressure on myself to do that. What I really value is having deep and meaningful conversations with people. How can I do more of that? And that's how I became a career coach for engineers, because software engineering wasn't fulfilling anymore. That's when I pivoted. That's when I took ownership of my own career instead of doing what everybody else is doing, climbing the ladder.
And if you're interested in having Dagna help you out, her website is themindfuldev.com. Anything else you'd like to say, Dagna, before we wrap it up?
I am glad you pointed people out to my website. Another thing that I'm doing right now is writing a book about all the things that we talked about, right? Because as I work with my clients, a lot of patterns emerged and a lot of patterns cover the things that we discussed, common problems, common roadblocks, common issues, keeping people stuck in their career or not knowing what to do next. That's what's in my book. Hopefully by the time that we release this episode, it's going to be on the market. But if you go to my website and sign up for the case study that is there, you'll be added to my newsletter and you'll be the first one to know when the book is out.
Okay, you just did a dangerous thing. You told us you were an author.
I am an aspiring author.
You're an aspiring author.
I am writing my book. Unless you count my bachelor and master thesis, I kind of wrote those,
Okay. What has your process been like for writing a book?
Get help. Get third-party help, not for writing the book. I am writing it myself, but I do have an editor that has a process that I've been following in order to get what is there in my head, the experiential knowledge, one, from my experience working as a software engineer and the experience of me working with my clients and the results I've been helping them get. How to put all that into paper, my editor is helping me with doing all that.
And then it's just easy, right? You just upload it.
It's so freaking hard. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm back to the stage when I was first learning how to code. I'm frustrated. I write things down. They don't work. I don't know why. I want to just toss my computer out the window. It's very similar, like learning how to code, learning how to write a book.
Let me just make it simple for you, Dagna. Be, do, have. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. I had a blast. Thanks for having me.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.